Okay, welcome to Morality and Religion, Chapter 5. And we're going to see how this works. This is a pointer that I'll use now and again throughout this particular lesson. So we're on morality and religion. So let's go forward. What is beyond the natural realm? Well, I feel like this is a setup, huh? Yeah, it's the supernatural, right? It's called the metaphysical in philosophical language and scientific language. It's a metaphysical. Now, there are some debates that can come out of religion, and we're going to look at a couple of them, but mostly we're going to stick to the source of the main question in the book. But here's some questions, and I know this comes up, so I'm going to just cover them very briefly. But one concern is that all religions lead to the same thing. They're all this different road going up the same mountain, or they're all this, the same little tributary river going to the same ocean or something like that. They all come from the same source, and some say they're all from the same source, but they're very different. I teach a world religion class. Um, Religions do things different. Oh, there are some similarities, and I think there's some really good lessons that can be learned from all religions. They have some really good ideas, focus, um, but they are not all the same, not at all. Um, but in our book, in this chapter, while religions do different things, it's called the divine command theory. This is the first normative theory that we're going to be looking at. So we're going to be looking at 8 others. So um, buckle up and take notes. You need to take notes if you want to do well in college. If you sit and with your eyes shut and think, yep, you're going to remember all of this, well, you're only lying to yourself, okay? You're kidding yourself if you think that's going to happen. You're not going to do well, at least. You might pass or survive. But if you really want to do well, you need to take some notes. And I will help to highlight what things to pay attention to. The first thing is note the 3 assumptions that this book points out about religions. Okay, the first one is that religious belief is needed to get us by, or to get us to do our duty. We've got to believe in something. We have to have a religious belief to do right. Or morality must be created by someone, and God is the best candidate for that job. So therefore, God creates morality, and God is the only one for that. And then the third assumption is that the religious wisdom is really the key to providing us with moral guidance. Some people believe these things firmly, and he's going to, in this book, this chapter 5, we're going to look at as to why the divine command theory has some challenges and see what they are. Okay, some key terms I want you to be familiar with. These write down, take note, and recognize that in religion, when you're talking about religious ideas and the people that hold them, okay, so the people that hold the ideas, when we're talking about ethics, it's the stance that people have. Their particular worldview is what carries that normative theory through for them. Um, Likewise, in religion, there are different people with different worldviews or stances about religion, and they are the individuals that make their decisions, if you will, in their religious activities or not. An atheist or atheism, an atheist is the person who believes in no God. Okay, that's what atheism. Atheism is a group of people or the ideology that there is no such thing as God. Agnostics are those who they believe in a God. They believe that, but they don't have enough knowledge to make a decision. An agnostic just doesn't know enough. They got to have more. You got to give them more information. They're sitting on the fence. They're almost they know, but not enough to make a decision whether there's a God or whether there's not, or um, maybe how to believe in the God is, their fences are different, but kind of hard to nail down. But the idea is that they don't really know enough. That's the idea. Gnostic is knowledge in Greek. It's actually gnostic. Um, if you were using the English backwards, but anyway, theists are those who believe in God. Um, and there are different kinds of theists out there. There are Buddhist theists, there are Hindu theists, there are Muslim theists, there are all different kinds. Judaism, um, and Christian theists. Most people associate these with terms with Western religions, but they aren't necessarily that way. The theist is one who believes in God, and the deist is a particular theist, okay? They believe in God, but they believe God kind of made a clock, wind up watch, and then walked away and let it run down. That's kind of the classic idea of what a deist was. But there are some various God types as well. There are people who follow the God, and those are what we just looked at: theists, deists, atheists, and agnostics. But then there are also um, not the followers, but the God itself are different. Some people believe in a God who is very one of these things, okay? Maybe there's no God. Maybe there's poly. There are many gods, or monotheistic, which means mono, one God. There are several religions out there, 5 or so, that are monotheistic in nature. The Western religions are 3 of them, and Sikhism is a monotheistic religion. Some might put Buddhism as one. It depends on the Buddhist, though. And some might put Jainists, though, but it depends on the Jain. Most Jains actually say there is no God, but that's something for a different class. Monotheistic just means there is one God. Polytheistic means there are many gods. I believe in many gods. I might believe in the god of Zeus. I believe in the god of Jupiter and Saturn and Nike, and I'm mixing them up. I realize Greek and Roman gods, but the idea is that Athena and different ones. Those are groups, people who believe in many different gods out there. They're polytheistic. Okay, and atheistic, or they don't believe in any God. And then there's one that normally most of us don't believe, but hey, a lot of tribal religions, indigenous religions believe this. And what Shinto is kind of this way. In Japan, the idea that everything, the world, the rock, the stone, the water, the trees, the air, the moon, the stars, they're all gods. Everything's a god, and we need to respect all of these things. That's called more of a pantheistic idea. So there are multiple ways of viewing who God is, and there are different ways of following God or believing in a God. So for this on motivation, this is where the chapter 5 really kicks in. Where atheism prevents us from seeing why we should even be moral. Some people will say that. And if we are blinded in our reasons to be good, then we will probably be bad. In other words, if you don't believe in any morals, atheists don't have to believe in morals. Some people will say this. I'm not saying all atheists don't believe in morals, because that's actually totally untrue. But some people will say these things and then come to a conclusion that maybe therefore, without a belief in God, people are likely to stay away from the path of any kindness, any goodness, any virtue. So with God in the picture, our will is strengthened and we are better people to carry out moral behavior. We'll be good and recognize bad. But some people will say that, that if you don't believe in God, you can't do this. Why is this so? Well, religious people are motivated to get to heaven, to stay out of hell. Now, this is a very Western religion idea. Okay, I'm not going to say it's very Christian necessarily, because there's heaven and hell ideas in Judaism. There's heaven, and where Christianity stems from, by the way. And there are heaven and hell ideas out of Islam, which also stemmed out of Judaism. And there are heaven and hell ideas in the Eastern religions, such as Buddhism. They have a very strong hell concept. It's very scary. Hinduism has a very strong hell concept. But if we're in the divine command theory, this normative theory that's telling us that the divine is in charge, some religious people are just motivated to, hey, I don't want to go to hell. So whatever the divine says to do that. Who wants to go to hell? I mean, hell is the worst thing you could imagine. Probably it's different for different religions, but nonetheless. So my question is, and I'm inserting this, really? That's what religious people are motivated by? I think maybe some are motivated by to stay out of hell when they first become a follower, but the real motivation is to please their God, to please the divine. Now, he does come to a good conclusion, I think is very pointed in this chapter, that they are more conscientious. They're more aware of what's going on. They're aware of heaven and hell. They're of reward or punishment is one way to look at this. From a philosophical standpoint, they are more conscientious of what's going on, and so maybe they're motivated by their consciousness. Religion doesn't always help us to become better people. In fact, you could find some studies on some serial killers and sociopaths and psychopaths. They often know a lot about religion, a lot about Christianity, for instance, in America. Christianity is a base religion here in America, even though more and more other religions are coming in all the time. You can do studies of sociopaths and things and find out just because they know, that doesn't keep them from doing bad things. So knowledge isn't necessarily going to play the part. Now, if they're motivated to really please the religious creator of that religion, maybe that's a difference. But moral principles have to be good in the first place, and I think there's some really good value in this statement. We need to understand that there needs to be some solid moral principle. And I'm going to challenge us with a thought here in a bit. The fear of God, oh man, and I don't know if you've ever heard this, but where people say, I'm going to put the fear of God into you. Well, I don't know if you can actually do that or what that actually means to some people. But the question is, does the fear of God really motivate? Now, Jesus used that in his teachings in, say, the Gospel of Luke in chapter 12, you could turn to like verse 4 and 5, and he says, don't fear him who can kill you, but fear him who can cast your soul to eternal hell. Now, there's a motivation. And that's probably where a lot of people get this idea, or those kinds of ideas of we're motivated to stay out of hell or to go to heaven. But the next question, first of all, does the fear of God motivate? It can. Some just shrug it off and probably say, there's not a such thing, so I'm not worried about it, or, I'll worry about it later. The other is, does the negative motivation work? Let's say in basketball practice, and I know coaches do this a lot. I was in basketball in college for 3 years, and I heard a lot of negative motivation. If you don't do that, you're going to run sprints, you're going to run lines, you're going to do this, you're going to pay, Beatty, if you don't get, so there's a lot of negative motivation. Sometimes, that does help in the short term. But if I'm in a workplace and if I'm getting paid to do something, do you think negative motivation is going to work, or positive reinforcement, positive motivation? That's the real question. Which one is better? Most of us would have this discussion in groups. And in fact, if we did this in class, we may do this. But we would find that positive motivation typically is what everyone recognizes works best. And the reasoning may be different, but nonetheless, there it is. So religious belief is needed for motivation. That's the first assumption. But and he in his book says, well, maybe not. It doesn't seem to motivate. The second assumption is God is really the creator of morality. And so this particular part of his argument starts on page 66. And why do you think people think this? This would be a question for you to sit and think about. Why do people think that God is the creator of morality? Now, depending upon your view of God, the answer would be different. What some people have thought and how they have tried to prove or clarify their understandings are very different. And in this chapter, page 66, he says for every lawmaker, there's got to be for every law, there's got to be a lawmaker. And kind of like that other one argument we said earlier, then God must be so he's perfect, or he's the only one really qualified. But in this argument, humans cannot be the author of moral law since we're imperfect. If humans can't be the author of moral law, then it's God's the author. Therefore, God's the author of moral laws. Well, that may or may not fly. It doesn't for the most part fly for a lot of people, because morality is a set of norms. There must be someone with the authority to create them. It's kind of what's behind this. And so there's the question of morality and normality. Who sets the norm? Why do we know murder is bad? Or why do we know it's wrong? Why do we know lying is wrong? Now, there's other ways to get to these things rather than just say from someone's scripture. I'm going to use some very specific language in this chapter about religious groups so that you can help you to understand what is really the case, scripture versus the Bible, because not everyone believes in the Bible, even if they're religious. So next, the supernatural and Western religions. I'm going to give you a picture here of a man. His name is Thomas Aquinas, and he came and with some ideas. I'm going to back up. Hopefully this works. Let's see. Maybe not. Oh well. There's an argument from contingency. Thomas Aquinas, you might pause on that previous page and look at it. He was a monk in the Catholic Church, and I think Benedictine monk, and he came up. He was also a philosopher of his day, and he came up with an argument from contingency. I'm going to explain this a little bit. There are contingent things. That's the first idea. The second idea is that contingent things can cause other things to be contingent. There can only be contingent things. Not sure you're following, but think, and if you don't know what contingent is, you're totally lost. Contingent means that you walk into the room and there's a Dr. Pepper sitting on a platter on your bedroom, on your bed in your room. The Dr. Pepper on a platter is contingent upon someone putting it there. It doesn't just happen, right? It's contingent that someone put it there, whether you did before you left, or someone else did while you were gone, or maybe they did it right in plain sight. But the idea is that it had to have been placed there by somebody, by something. That it being there was contingent upon someone. It being there is also contingent upon someone creating Dr. Pepper back whenever they did. And that was contingent upon someone creating the formula and putting a plant together and creating bottles and so on. You can back this up, and that was contingent upon, and what was that contingent upon? Someone learning about different mixes, and that was contingent upon someone wanting drinks, and that was contingent upon someone wanting sweet drinks, and which is contingent upon finding, oh, we can make sugar into a sweet drink, and that's really good, and so on. So I hope you can follow me that things aren't just the way they are. They haven't always been that way. It's contingent upon something that was before that. Everything has been placed there by something else or someone else somehow, one way or another. So contingent things are dependent upon other things. So this point 2, contingent things can cause other contingent things, but there cannot be only contingent things. If we back up, and that's what he's going to say in this next one, because that would mean that if there's an infinite regress of contingency and a possibility of nothing might have existed, that doesn't even make sense, does it? Things are always contingent upon other things, but we keep backing up. We got to come to something. An infinite regress is impossible, is what he's saying. We can't go backwards and say, well, that's contingent upon something else, and something had to start everything, right? This is an argument from contingency, so there must be at least one necessary thing, and that is God. That's the way Thomas Aquinas argued this idea about God is the beginning. And so he would also use this idea, not just an ontological argument, if that even means anything to you, the argument about how we even have come into being, but he's using it as a moral argument, to show how God is the creator of our morality ideas, okay? Or God is the creator of morals. Whether you believe that or not, this is Thomas Aquinas. Remember his name, what he has done here, and you're good. He's created this argument from contingency. Basically, you have to back up everything into something. Where did you come from? I used this in class once. Where did you come from? Well, my mom and dad. Okay, where'd they come from? Their mom and dad. Okay, keep backing up. Okay, and then someone will say the very, very first man on earth. Okay, man and woman on earth. So where did they come from? Well, and then people kind of get stuck. They don't know what to say. Well, some people, oh, well, that's easy. We came from um, evolved other human beings, and just go back. We're either from apes, but the basic two directions are either we evolved from apes or we were created by God. And that's the argument from contingency. But apes still have to have an argument. Where did that come from? Big Bang Theory. Where did that come from? You know. So the supernatural in Western religions, and we have another. I want to show another picture. And so right in the middle is me, right here. What I look like if you haven't seen me before, which is not the case, probably. I'm in Jerusalem here. The backdrop, this is on January probably 9th, a few years ago. And this is the Dome of the Rock right here. This is a Muslim holy place. It is not a mosque. This is a holy place. It's the third most important holy place of Muslims. This is a wall right here, and this wall is about 25 feet tall, okay? So it goes all the way, and it goes way over here on the edge. You can't see it, and then you can see it clear over here, about 2 miles away. There, and it goes up over here, and up over this ridge, and then back down that side, and then back over, and then back around. That's a little over a square mile, I think. But that's Old Jerusalem. Okay, you can see the new city behind it. But this picture, the reason I bring it to our attention is that there are 3 different religions represented here. This is the holy city of Jerusalem. This is the holy place of Islam. The Muslims worship in this. Jews do not. This sits on an edge of a wall right here, and this wall stands about 50 feet high. And on the bottom side of that wall is called the Western Wall. It's the holy place of Israel today. And then there's probably a synagogue or two in the mix. These are towers, minarets, and they proclaim the sound of prayers 5 times a day for the Muslims. There are a few Christian churches. Here's one right here. Walk through this one. It's a little church. You can't see it very well, but there's a cross on top. There may be a church here. This may be a synagogue. I don't remember. It's on the other far corner. There are 4 sections in this old city. There are 2 sections of Christians, 1 section of Muslims, which is over to the right, and 1 section of Jewish people that live here and that have access to their businesses and everything. But I think it's important to see this is a Western religions. They both stem, I should say, there are 3 Western religions. Islam is the last one. It's the youngest one. It was created in around 622 BC or 620 AD, sorry, in the Common Era. So it's only about 1,400 years old. Okay, Christianity was created around 2,000 years ago, and then Judaism was created around 4,000 years ago. And Christianity and Islam came from Judaism. They are the 3 Western religions. That will be on your quiz and on the test, final test. And so this is just a continuation of this picture here where the Dome of the Rock, it's a holy place, and this is the Western Wall. I said it's about a 50-foot wall. You can see people standing here, and that wall goes all the way up. Then you're up on the holy place of Muslims. And down here's the holy place for Jews. And I was able to walk down here and walk over here and pray against that wall, sort of thing. And this is a ramp that goes up, and it goes over to the right, and it goes up to the mosque that's on the right side in this picture. It's Alask, something like that. Well, at any rate, so those are the Western religions. Then what Thomas Aquinas has done is taken a lot of older type of arguments, used them, and then talked about them and reframed them and kind of Christianized them. So he wasn't afraid of doing that. The first one of the arguments that happened, very similar to the contingency argument, was the unmoved mover by Aristotle. Now, he wasn't arguing for Christianity or Judaism. He was just arguing the fact that somewhere in the past we've had to have something to start stuff somehow. And they weren't thinking science back then. They weren't putting science in that place. That didn't happen until, as a real source of things. That didn't happen until late in the 18th century, and it started happening in the 19th century, in the 1800s, is when that really became a thing. So that's fairly new in history of the world. Even though it's always been around, there's always been ideas of evolution that has never been prominent until just recently. The unmoved mover, though, is an Aristotle, his idea. And then Thomas Aquinas took it and moved it around. He moved the unmoved mover and used it also. And it really inspired him to come up with several different ideas. The just war theory, I'm going to go sideways for a minute. This is the best place to put it in this entire semester during religion. This really did come early on, probably maybe from Aristotle, but I know Thomas Aquinas had the just war theory, and there are 3 points to what he had to say. And this is on your quiz, this is on the final. Okay, just war theory, remember it. A war, whenever there's wars, there must be they must be for a just purpose. You don't just start a war because you're bigger, you're stronger than someone else, and you're just going to take over their stuff. And you want their wealth, you want their oil, you want their gold, you want their beautiful museums or whatever you might be thinking. You want their people, so we just take over. That's not just, that's not right, and that's what his theory starts with. It must be for a just purpose. If you're going to go in and help people that are being treated unjustly, that's totally different than going and just taking their stuff and running. A war must be waged by a recognized governmental authority. So if you ever heard of a group of people called ISIS, and they're pretty much gone now, I have a feeling they're going to make a comeback, but nonetheless, ISIS is a group that is not recognized by any governmental authority. They aren't a state. They're just a group of people that got together and said, hey, we are Muslims and we're going to do our thing, and this is what Islam says, so this is what we're doing. Whether it was right or not, they killed a lot of people. They destroyed a lot of good sites in the Middle East here in the last 10 years. Last 15 years. But they weren't recognized by as a group, a state. They had no sanctioned territory. They have no place in the United Nations. They're just a group of people. But war must be done by a recognized group, and peace must be the real central motive. The idea, if people are living in peace, you don't just go in there and start stealing their stuff, so that can't do that. You might have violence, bad things might happen, people will get killed, things destroyed, but the idea is to move toward peace, to let people have a peace of mind and let them work and let them have families and enjoy life. That's what the just war theory is, and that's the way we're going to use it in this class. And it may pop up again, but you do need to know the theory. So the divine command theory is simply this. It's an act to do things just because they're required by the divine. An act is morally required just because it is commanded by the divine, and immoral just because the divine forbids it. Okay, and you can replace the divine with God. But I think this covers all religions. Hindu divine might be Ram. The Hindu divine may be someone else, Vishnu or Shiva. Or obviously there's another divine called Allah, or there's another divine called the One, the True One, or another divine, so on. So whatever their divine might require is what is to do, what you're to do. The first two commands ever, well, maybe Adam and Eve were those, right? To not eat, to multiply. One positive is to multiply, and the next one negative, don't do this, don't eat, and they ended up eating. They ended up doing the negative command, don't do. Maybe if we tell things positive, in a positive way, they're more likely to do it. That could be a lesson learned there. Never thought of that before. But at any rate, going on. The length of obedience, we don't know how long they remained in the garden before they were kicked out. They were booted out, and God provided a way. He provided and gave them provisions. He gave them clothing even when they left. The very first set of leather clothes were provided by God as he booted them out of the garden for disobeying. So I just bring that up because a lot of people use that in a lot of different religious groups. There is a creation story type in almost any religion. So in Judaism and Shinto and Hinduism and so on. But they have a dilemma when it comes to, where is your divine getting its law? So here's a dilemma. A moral decision where equally undesirable choices must be made. That's a dilemma. If you're put in a position, we'll do this later, but we'll be put in a position where we have to make a decision. Does it go on the right or the left? On the right, you kill 3 people. On the left, you kill 5 people. Which one you're going to do? But how about on the right? When you kill 5 people, you don't want to do that, but you're killing the president. If the 3 people, less people, but you're killing kids. Which, where do you go? Neither choice is desirable, but that's what a dilemma is called. When you have to make a decision, a moral decision, okay, where equally undesirable choices must be made. So there's a video, you can watch it. I've already assigned that, I think, before, so you kind of know a little bit about Euthyphro and the dilemma that is had through this. The Euthyphro dilemma is really about Euthyphro, the man on the right in this picture, the younger one, and the older guy, Socrates. They're having a discussion while they're waiting for a trial. And this was written by Plato. By the way, Socrates didn't do any writing. Plato did. Plato wrote, because he was a student of Socrates, Plato wrote a lot of Socrates' stories, and Euthyphro is one of them. Socrates died around 400 BC 399. He was 70 years old. So some say he died a young man, prematurely. You'll find out why. So this is a picture. Both are in Athens, Greece. I spent some time on this hill and looked down, and this is where the Euthyphro dilemma happened. And in that, it was probably a place similar to this, where Euthyphro went up the steps of an agora and met Socrates, and they had a discussion while they both waited trial. And this is kind of an artist's depiction of what it could have looked like, back in the day when they were alive. The In Athens, the Parthenon of Athena is up here on top of the hill, and looking down, there's all sorts of things going on. Well, as I mentioned, both were there for a trial. Euthyphro is a prosecutor. He's against a man who killed his slave, and here's the real catch. The man who killed his slave was his dad. So Euthyphro is going to take his dad to court for murder because he killed someone, and a slave at that, which back in the day, a slave could have been any passerby that just sold himself, or it could have been a gift. A slave could have been something else, not based on the color of skin at all. But this slave was killed by his dad wasn't caring for him, didn't give him enough water when he was out in the field to work, didn't give him enough food. He starved to death, died of dehydration. And Euthyphro felt bad for the slave and thought that this is unfair, uncalled for, and it was absolutely wrong. According to the gods, they say that you should not do this. So Euthyphro is taken to the court. Socrates was there as a defendant for himself because he was taken, put in jail for disrupting the city and getting the youth, inciting the youth against city traditions, the traditions of learning about the gods, being taught by the gods, and going to the temples of the gods. Socrates was teaching the youth. That's nonsense. So the city took Socrates, put him in jail, and they are going to have a trial about Socrates. Is this worth condemning him to death for disrupting the traditions of the city's youth? Well, I'll just tell you, yeah, they all condemned him to death. So he was to drink his own poison. But while they were waiting, they had this grand discussion, Euthyphro and Socrates. And this is it. Their discussion was about the gods and where they got their information. Socrates wasn't interested in what god you worshipped. He wanted to know, where did the gods as a group, where did they get their moral teachings, and where did they get their information? Because Euthyphro was maybe he was a professor, but he was definitely an expert of the gods. He knew all about the different gods of the Greek gods at the time, and he knew that they knew this was wrong to kill someone, and this manner of starving them to death, not letting them have water. And so Socrates asked, really? How do you know? Why do you say, well, Euthyphro said, because it wouldn't be right. How do you know it's not right? Because the God said so. Why did the God said so? Socrates would ask, and Euthyphro said, well, because that's their will. And then Socrates asked, well, how do you know it's their will? Because that's what they say. Euthyphro said, I don't know if you're catching this, but there's a circular reasoning going on in Euthyphro's action and reaction to Socrates. So finally, Socrates stopped him and said, hey, listen, Does God will it because it's good? Or are the gods saying that you cannot do this because it's wrong? Or is it wrong because God wills it? Is it good because God wills it? Are the gods saying that it's wrong because that's their will? I want you to study these two questions. What's the difference between the first question and the second one? Getting away from Socrates, everyone is kind of, and the Euthyphro discussion actually back in the day, this is the way they've brought it to our century, brought it up to date. Does God will it because it's good, or is it good because God wills it? You might think we're asking the same question, but they're very, very different focus. Does God will it because of good? Is the question about the goodness of this moral behavior or the badness of it, if you want to reverse the question. Is that moral idea, is murder, is killing someone through dehydration or killing someone by starving them to death, is that wrong? Or is that wrong just because God says so? Is the first question, is it wrong on the inside? Is there some moral core that says this is bad? Or this moral core that says this is good? Is there a reason behind the good? Or is it good just because God spews it out of his mouth? That's the question. Those are the two questions, and you need to remember the two questions. And this is the way I often ask it and recognize the tone of my questions. Kind of goes up and then it comes back down. Like a roller coaster that doesn't quite make it all the way at the top and then rolls back. Okay? Does God will it because it's good? And notice the reverse. Is it good because God wills it? One is asking about the goodness of this particular command, and the other one is asking, is it just because God said so? I hope you make sense of that. Okay, but Euthyphro, you've only found you've only gone around in circles. You have not explained goodness or piety or righteousness at all, says Socrates. And Euthyphro is sweating, this whole idea. Excuse me, I've got to go now. And really, this play, this whole dilemma is built up. I mean, it would take you about 30 minutes to read it, but you can. At any rate, Euthyphro dismisses the thing and doesn't really answer the question. But you can see Socrates is always asking questions. And if someone's always asking questions, what kind of person are they? If you're thinking skeptic, you could be right. He was very skeptical of people's answers. He was always trying to find the underlying reason behind. He was very metaphysical. And he was very meta, wanting to understand, as Socrates got him into trouble. Euthyphro argument, either God has reasons or he doesn't have reasons. And if God lacks reasons, then his commands are arbitrary. Are they arbitrary? Well, if they are, if God has reasons, then his reasons are not his commands. Then it's the reasons, not the commands, that make the actions right or wrong. There are therefore either God is imperfect or his divine command theory is false. So some people using this whole Euthyphro dilemma, they would throw out the idea of the divine command theory altogether. There's no point, they would say, that there is, should be, and can be a divine command theory. But this author will say, no, but God is perfect. He is not imperfect. But still come the same result. The divine command theory is not good because of the way they've staged this argument. Now, here's the doctrine of the divine, and it's not the doctrine of divine command theory. This is the doctrine of the divine simplicity. It's basically saying that the God of, say, Christianity and Judaism, God is the same as his attributes are the same as his being, which are the same as his commands. They are all one. You can't distinguish God's actions from his attributes, from his nature, from his speaking. It's all the same. That's who he is, what he is, and how it works. There's no real distinction between him as a doer or as a commander. So that's the deal, is he's identical to his attributes and to his nature. So just reminding us what the first two assumptions were. Religious belief is needed for motivation was the first assumption. The second assumption is that God is the creator of morality. And the third is that the religion is an essential source for moral guidance. Some people believe that. His command is the rule. That's the divine command theory in a nutshell. His command is the rule. The question is, who's the commander? So there's a story he uses on page 71 as God as a thermometer. So he uses a story of a thermometer. And here's the question I put in. Does it prescribe or does it describe? Now, if you say the thermometer describes, you're correct. Is all it does. It's all it does. The truth of the matter, it describes temperature. It does not prescribe anything. It doesn't tell you what to do. It just shows you what the temperature of the room is, or the temperature of wherever. It tells you what the tone is. It doesn't prescribe anything. But a thermostat, on the other hand, if you know the difference, thermostat, one of those things with you move and say, hey, I want it warmer in here, or I want it cooler in here. That, does it describe or does it prescribe? Thermostat prescribes. God is a cosmic reporter, a guide, an infallible moral compass, he says. So therefore, he is a describer, but can't really prescribe because he doesn't, there's reasons for prescribing, and God isn't those reasons. But the divine command, or not the divine command, but the doctrine of divine simplicity would say, no, he is the command. He is the source of reason. That's why he gives the commands. All right. The third assumption, challenged through religion. The questions are, is religion reliable? Here are the questions. How do we know which divine to follow? That's always going to be the challenge. Shiva, Vishnu, or, Jesus, Allah. I mean, which one is it? Yeah. Who? Why? Is it Moses? Which divine do we follow? And then the further question, have the transmitters or the prophets that have written some of these things, were they truthful? And then the copiers of those prophets over the years, when they scribed down the manuscripts, have they been correct and clear and good? Have they left out words or have they added things? That's the other question that people have. So there's some real challenges in religion, and those can be dealt with and have to be dealt with. But here's and some more issues. The sources of the primary book. Which holy book do we use? Quran, the Bible, the three baskets. Which one? Nature of the divine. What's God like, and who is he? Stories. Where do we get them? Where are we going? What's the purpose? That's kind of sound like a worldview, right? How do we get salvation? And it differs for different religions. How do you get to the point of getting salvation? So Getting to salvation is a challenge that religions put forth. But in our class, we're looking at how do we make good decisions? How do we make decisions? And so we have to make our own decision in the matter of religion. This class isn't geared to give us religious affiliation nor religious instruction any more than what I've already done. So we need to recognize the difference between the divine command theory and the divine command theorist. Okay, there's a couple differences. And then lastly, most of religions recognize that their God does want us to know the right and wrong. And so now we're going to proceed. We've gone through the whole divine command theory, chapter 5. We've done it in basically 54 minutes. God does want us to know right and wrong. So now let's proceed as if we can find right and wrong. We can find morality without religion. Okay? This isn't a religious class, even though we did need to focus on this over the years, and people still do say that religion has the right answers. And, you know, a lot of people would agree with that, 100%. But for this class, what we want to do is struggle and challenge our thoughts. Religion isn't totally out of the picture because it keeps popping up. But we're going to look at in different ways. How do we find our moral guideline without religion? Okay, so you're making a summary of this video and turning it into Red Zone. And we'll see you next time.